The maintenance shaft on level 47 of Space Station Omega wasn't meant for conversations, but that's where everything changed. Rayna Patel crawled through the narrow tunnel, her toolbelt clanking against the metal grating as she followed the erratic energy readings on her diagnostic pad. At 34, she was the station's most experienced systems engineer, though most of her colleagues preferred the comfort of the upper levels to these cramped maintenance passages. 10 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Assembly, and Space Station Omega had become one of the primary meeting points between Earth and the various alien species that made up galactic society. Most humans still avoided the lower levels, especially since the arrival of the Calaxians, massive crystalline beings whose warrior culture and imposing presence made even veteran spacers nervous. Rayna's diagnostic pad beeped again, drawing her attention to a junction ahead. The energy fluctuations were strongest here, though according to the station's schedules, this section should have been empty. As she approached, she heard something that stopped her cold, a deep, resonating hum that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull itself. Following the sound, she rounded a corner and found herself facing something impossible. A Calaxian warrior lay slumped against the wall, nearly 12 feet tall even sitting down. Its crystalline body, usually a brilliant azure, had dulled to a concerning pale blue. What caught Rayna's attention wasn't just the warrior's presence in this restricted area, but the fact that its crystalline form was cracked along one side, leaking a luminescent fluid that seemed to pulse with its own light. Most humans would have called security immediately. Some would have run. Rayna did neither. Instead, she found herself taking a step forward, her engineer's mind already analyzing the damage. The Calaxian's 4 eyes, each like a faceted diamond, fixed on her with an intensity that made the air feel electric. "Your presence here is unauthorized, small one," the Calaxian's voice resonated through the chamber, though Rayna noticed it lacked the usual strength she'd heard from their kind in the public areas. "Leave now." Rayna stood her ground, gesturing to the leaking crack. "That looks like a structural failure along a primary energy conduit. In about 20 minutes, you're going to experience catastrophic system failure." She unclipped her tool belt. "I can help." The Calaxian's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. "You presume much, human. I am Dorix of the 3rd Sunforge clan. We do not accept aid from lesser beings." "Well, Dorix of the 3rd Sunforge clan," Rayna replied, already pulling out her specialized welding tools, "in about 19 minutes, you're going to be a very impressive collection of crystal shards. I'm Rayna Patel, and I fix things." "That's not presumption, it's just fact." She could feel the weight of all 4 eyes studying her as she approached. The Calaxian's crystalline body hummed at a frequency she could feel in her teeth, but she noticed it was irregular, stuttering like a failing engine. "Your kind fears us," Dorix stated, though Rayna detected a note of curiosity in the harmonics of their voice. "My kind hasn't spent much time fixing quantum matrices and crystal-based technology," she answered, scanning the damage with her diagnostic tool. "But I've been studying your people's technical documents since you arrived. Fascinating stuff. Your biocrystalline structure isn't that different from our quantum computers, just infinitely more complex." Without waiting for permission, she began working, using a modified phase welder to help stabilize the crack. The luminescent fluid was hot, but her insulated gloves protected her as she carefully sealed the damage. "You understand our technology?" Thorix's tone shifted to something closer to surprise than disdain. "I understand enough," Rayna replied, focused on her work. "Your people's engineering is beautiful. The way you integrate crystalline computing with biological systems. I've never seen anything like it. The efficiency is incredible." She made another careful pass with the welder. "Though I have some thoughts about your thermal regulation systems." A sound emerged from Dorix that took Rayna a moment to recognize as laughter, like wind chimes in an earthquake. "You would critique Calaxian engineering while making unauthorized repairs to a warrior of the 3rd Sunforge clan?" "Someone has to," she replied, completing the final seal. "There. That should hold until you can get proper medical attention. Though I'd recommend avoiding any rapid thermal changes for at least 12 hours. Thorix flexed, crystalline limbs moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. The warrior's color had already begun to return to a healthier azure. You show unusual courage, Reyna Patel. And skill. They rose to their full height, towering over her. Why did you help me? Reyna packed away her tools, considering the question. Because it needed doing. Because your technology is fascinating. And because maybe it's time our species stopped assuming we can't understand each other. She smiled up at the massive figure. Also, I hate seeing broken things I could fix. Thorix was quiet for a long moment, crystalline features shifting in complex patterns. Perhaps, they finally said, there is wisdom in your words. And perhaps the third Sunforge clan has something to learn about strength from a small human engineer. As Reyna led Thorix toward the medical bay, neither of them could have known that this chance meeting in a maintenance shaft would change not just their lives, but the relationship between their species forever. Sometimes the strongest bridges are built not by diplomats or warriors, but by those who simply see something broken and decide to fix it. Word spread quickly through Space Station Omega about the human engineer who dared to repair a Calaxian warrior. In the station's bustling main cafeteria, Reyna sat alone at her usual table, analyzing data on her pad while picking at her lunch. The whispers and stares from her fellow humans had become a constant companion over the past week. Is this section occupied? The crystalline resonance of Thorix's voice made several nearby diners jump. Reyna looked up to see the massive Calaxian warrior standing by her table, holding what appeared to be their equivalent of a food tray, a complex crystalline structure containing swirling energy patterns. It's all yours, she replied, gesturing to the reinforced seating area designed for larger species. As Thorix settled in, the crystalline patterns in their body shifting with the movement, Reyna noticed other Calaxians watching from their usual section with what she interpreted as disapproval. Your repairs have proven most effective, Thorix said, their four eyes creating dancing patterns of light. Our medical specialists were impressed by your understanding of our physiology. Speaking of that, Reyna activated a holographic display from her pad, showing complex energy patterns. I've been studying the station's power fluctuations. They're similar to the damage you sustained, just on a smaller scale. Someone or something is causing systematic failures in our quantum matrix. Thorix's crystalline form shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of concern Reyna had learned to recognize. You believe my injury was not an isolated incident? Look at these patterns. Reyna expanded the hologram, showing multiple points across the station's schematics. They're too precise to be accidents. But here's the interesting part, the damage signatures suggest knowledge of both human and Calaxian technology. Before Thorix could respond, a group of human security officers approached their table, led by Lieutenant Marcus Walsh, his face set in stern lines. Engineer Patel, you're accessing restricted station schematics in the presence of an unauthorized alien species. I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. Reyna felt Thorix's crystalline form vibrate with a dangerous frequency, but she placed a cautioning hand near them, not touching, but close enough to communicate. Lieutenant Walsh, I'm investigating power fluctuations that could endanger the entire station. Thorix is helping me understand the Calaxian aspects of our integrated systems. The Calaxians are barely tolerated here as it is, Walsh leaned closer, lowering his voice. We don't share sensitive technical data with them. Either come with us now, or I'll have to report this to Station Command. You question the honor of the Third Sunforge clan. Thorix's voice carried enough harmonics to rattle the nearby dishes. Several other Calaxians had risen from their seats, their crystalline forms pulsing with aggressive energy patterns. The cafeteria had gone silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Reyna stood slowly, her mind racing through possibilities like she would when solving a complex engineering problem. Lieutenant, she said carefully, in about 30 seconds, the power's going to fail in this section. When it does, the emergency containment fields will activate, trapping everyone here for at least 2 hours while systems reset. She held up her pad, showing a familiar energy pattern building in the local grid. Walsh's eyes widened. How did you? The lights flickered and died. But instead of darkness, the cafeteria was illuminated by the soft azure glow of Thorax's crystalline form. Without missing a beat, Reyna had already pulled out her tools and was removing a wall panel. Thorax, I need your help. Your crystalline structure can channel enough power to keep the containment fields from engaging while I reroute the system. She looked at Walsh. Lieutenant, unless you want to explain to Station Command why you prevented us from stopping another attack on critical station infrastructure, I suggest you help evacuate this section. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Thorax stepped forward, their crystalline body humming at a frequency that made Reyna's tools vibrate. What must I do? The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Reyna's hands moved with practiced precision while Thorax's crystalline form channeled power through pathways she quickly created. Human security officers and Galaxian warriors found themselves working together to guide civilians to safety. When the lights finally came back on, Reyna sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. The wall panel was a mess of bypassed circuits and temporary fixes, but it would hold. This was no malfunction, Thorax stated, their crystalline form still rippling with excess energy. The damage pattern matches my injury exactly. Lieutenant Walsh looked between them, his earlier hostility replaced with reluctant respect. You're saying someone's deliberately sabotaging the station? Both humans and Galaxians. Someone who wants to keep us divided, Reyna stood, already downloading the attack's data signature. And they just made their first mistake. Every system leaves traces, and now we have something to track. As humans and Galaxians alike gathered around them, drawn together by the shared crisis, Reyna felt something shift in the station's atmosphere. Sometimes it took a common enemy to forge unexpected alliances. The Third Sunforge clan does not forget those who aid us, Thorax announced, their voice carrying to every corner of the cafeteria. Reyna Patel has proven herself a friend to our people. Her investigation has our full support. Walsh holstered his weapon with a sigh. Station Command isn't going to like this, but, you've got our support too. Just try not to break too many regulations while you're saving us all. Reyna smiled, already planning their next move. No promises, Lieutenant. Some barriers are meant to be broken. As the crowd dispersed, she caught Thorax studying her with all 4 eyes. You knew the power would fail, they stated. I recognized the pattern from my research. But I needed everyone to see it happen to understand the threat we're facing. She gathered her tools. Ready to hunt down some saboteurs. The crystalline warrior's form pulsed with what she now recognized as anticipation. Lead the way, small engineer. This promises to be an interesting hunt indeed. Deep in the bowels of Space Station Omega, Reyna followed the faint trail of energy signatures through maintenance tunnels rarely visited by any species. Thorax moved behind her with surprising grace for a 12-foot crystalline being, their azure glow providing better illumination than her engineering lamp. The saboteur's trail leads to processing level 12, Reyna whispered, studying her modified scanner. But that section was decommissioned months ago. Yet it still draws power, Thorax observed, their crystalline form shifting to deeper blues. Small amounts, masked by routine system noise. Clever. Over the past 2 weeks, they had tracked similar energy signatures across the station, always one step behind their quarry. Each discovery revealed more sophisticated attempts to destabilize the station's human Galaxian integration systems. What had started as simple power fluctuations had escalated to more dangerous sabotage attempts. A sudden movement ahead made them freeze. Reyna's scanner picked up a complex energy pattern, neither purely human tech nor Galaxian, but something in between. Before she could analyze it further, emergency bulkheads slammed down around them with a deafening clang. It's a trap, Thorax's voice resonated through the enclosed space. They knew we were coming. Reyna was already at the nearest access panel, her fingers flying over the controls. The air recyclers are shutting down. We've got maybe 20 minutes before. She stopped as her pad detected a new signal. That's impossible. What do you see? This code, it's using both human and Galaxian encryption. But they're not just layered together, they're actually integrated. Someone's created a hybrid system that shouldn't exist yet. Her eyes widened as she decoded more of the signal. And it's not just in this section. It's spreading throughout the station's network. A deep humming emerged from Thorax's crystalline form, their version of a growl. The previous attacks were tests. This is their true purpose. The station's speakers crackled to life with a voice distorted beyond recognition. Such fascinating cooperation between species. The engineer and the warrior, breaking all their people's rules. But did you really think you were the only ones who learned to work together? Reyna's pad screamed with alerts as systems throughout the station began failing in cascade. They're triggering a complete shutdown. Life support, gravity control, everything. She looked up at Thorax. We need to get to the central core. It's the only place we can stop this. The core is 6 levels up, Thorax's crystalline structure pulsed with calculating patterns. Through multiple sealed bulkheads, with failing life support and gravity systems. Then we better move fast. Reyna pulled tools from her belt, already formulating a plan. I can bypass the bulkhead controls, but I'll need power, more than my tools can provide. Without hesitation, Thorax placed one massive crystalline hand against the wall. Energy coursed from their form into the station's systems, creating pathways Reyna could work with. The combination of Galaxian energy manipulation and human engineering expertise had become almost second nature to them now. As they fought their way up through the station, they encountered more evidence of their enemy's preparation. Each level presented new challenges, security systems turned against them, environmental controls gone haywire, and hybrid technology that defied both their experiences. They reached level 9 when Reyna's pad picked up thousands of distress signals from throughout the station. They're not just shutting systems down, she realized, horror creeping into her voice. They're turning the station's integration protocols against themselves. Human and Galaxian systems are fighting each other, each trying to assert control. Like an autoimmune response, Thorax observed, helping her through a section of fluctuating gravity. Using our differences to destroy us from within. The station shuddered around them as more systems failed. Through viewport panels, they could see parts of the station going dark, while others blazed with uncontrolled energy discharges. Why? Reyna asked as they worked to bypass another sealed door. Why go to all this trouble to turn our species against each other? Perhaps, Thorax's voice carried unusual softness, some fear what we represent. Cooperation between humans and Galaxians could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Not everyone would welcome such change. Before Reyna could respond, her pad detected a massive power surge above them. The core. They're trying to overload it. She looked at her friend, knowing what she had to ask. Thorax, I need your help for what comes next, but it's dangerous. The energy levels could shatter your crystalline structure. All 4 of Thorax's eyes fixed on her. You risked much to help me when we first met. Trust goes both ways, small engineer. As they raced toward the core, fighting against failing systems and their mysterious adversaries' traps, Reyna couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. A human engineer and a Galaxian warrior, running to save a station that had barely tolerated their friendship. The core access door loomed before them, pulsing with dangerous levels of hybrid energy. Beyond it waited their saboteurs, and answers that would change everything they thought they knew about the relationship between their species. Ready? Reyna asked, her hands poised over the door controls. Thorax's crystalline form blazed with determination. Lead the way, friend. Let us show them the true power of our cooperation. The core chamber of Space Station Omega blazed with otherworldly light as human and Galaxian technologies warred with each other. Reyna and Thorix burst through the access door to find a scene that defied explanation. 3 figures stood at the main control interface, 2 humans and a Galaxian, working in perfect synchronization. "Welcome to evolution," said the taller human, her hands dancing over hybrid controls unlike anything Reyna had ever seen. "I'm Director Valera. My colleagues and I have been expecting you. You're part of the synthesis project." Thorix's crystalline form pulsed with recognition. "The forbidden experiments in human-Galaxian integration." The Galaxian among them turned, their crystalline structure an unusual violet hue. "The Third Sunforge clan always was too bound by tradition, brother. We seek to transcend such limitations. You're trying to force our species to integrate by manufacturing a crisis," Reyna said, her engineer's mind rapidly piecing together their plan. "The station's systems aren't failing, they're transforming." "Precisely," the second human, a man with cybernetic augmentations visible along his temples, smiled. "Natural integration would take decades. We're accelerating the process. When this is over, humans and Galaxians will have no choice but to work together to survive." The station shuddered violently. On Reyna's pad, warning signals multiplied exponentially as the hybrid code spread through vital systems. Emergency alerts blared from every level, environmental systems going critical, structural integrity failing, thousands of lives hanging in the balance. "Your integration process is tearing the station apart," Reyna stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Real cooperation can't be forced. It has to be built on trust, understanding, choice. Like your friendship with this warrior." Valera gestured at Thorix. "A beautiful accident, but too slow. The galaxy needs more. The transformation has already begun. Soon, all stations will follow." The violet Galaxian raised their crystalline arms, channeling energy directly into the core. "Watch as we forge the future." But Reyna wasn't watching them. Her eyes were fixed on the core's energy patterns, seeing something the synthesis team had missed. "Thorix," she said quietly, "remember how we first met? How your crystalline structure was cracking under the strain of incompatible energies?" The station, Thorix's voice carried sudden understanding. "It's experiencing the same trauma on a massive scale. We need to rewrite the integration protocols." Reyna's fingers flew over her pad. "Not to force the systems apart or together, but to let them find their own balance. Like how we learn to work together, gradually, naturally." "You cannot stop progress," Valera warned, initiating another surge of hybrid energy. "We're not stopping it," Reyna looked up at her friend. "We're showing you a better way. Thorix, I need your help one more time. Like in the cafeteria, but bigger." Without hesitation, Thorix moved to the core interface, their crystalline form beginning to resonate at a frequency that made the air itself vibrate. Reyna connected her pad to the system, using everything she'd learned about both technologies to create new pathways. "The station's systems don't need to fight each other," she explained as she worked. "They just need to understand each other. Like we did." The synthesis team moved to stop them, but they had underestimated the bond between the engineer and warrior. Thorix's energy field kept them at bay while Reyna's code spread through the station, not forcing change, but offering choice. Gradually, the violent energy fluctuations began to stabilize. Throughout the station, human and Galaxian technologies found new ways to coexist, creating natural integration patterns that the synthesis team hadn't thought possible. Impossible, the violet Galaxian watched as their forced integration protocols were replaced by Reyna's adaptive ones. The energy patterns, they're harmonizing on their own. Not impossible, Thorix's voice carried pride. Simply a different kind of strength. One that comes from trust rather than force. Station security forces, both human and Galaxian, burst into the core chamber, led by Lieutenant Walsh and a team of crystalline warriors. As the synthesis team was taken into custody, Walsh surveyed the scene with bewilderment. "Anyone want to explain how you two went from investigating power fluctuations to saving the entire station and revolutionizing human Galaxian technological integration?" Reyna looked up at Thorix, sharing a moment of understanding with her friend. "Sometimes," she said, "the biggest changes start with the smallest repairs." As emergency teams worked to stabilize the station's new hybrid systems, Reyna and Thorix stood at a viewport, watching the stars. The station hummed around them with a new harmony, not perfect, but real, chosen rather than forced. "The Third Sunforge clan will have many questions about these events," Thorix mused. "As will your station command." "Let them ask," Reyna smiled, already making notes about improvements to the integration protocols. "We'll show them what's possible when warriors and engineers work together." The station's lights flickered briefly, then stabilized into a new pattern, neither purely human nor Galaxian, but something uniquely its own. Something that spoke of hope, and change, and bridges built between stars. 3 months after the synthesis incident, Space Station Omega had become something unprecedented in the galaxy, a true fusion of human and Galaxian innovation. In the newly established integration lab, Reyna stood before a gathered crowd of both species, presenting the results of their collaborative efforts. "The adaptive protocols we developed during the crisis have evolved beyond our initial expectations," she explained, gesturing to the holographic displays showing intricate patterns of merged technologies. "Each system now naturally finds its optimal balance between human and Galaxian methodologies." Thorix stood nearby, their crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the lab's walls. The warrior had become a permanent liaison between the station and the Third Sunforge clan, though many suspected it had more to do with a certain human engineer than official duties. "The Galactic Assembly has taken notice," announced Station Commander Zhou, stepping forward. "They're proposing to use Space Station Omega as a model for future integration projects. But more importantly, they want to understand how this partnership began." Reyna caught Thorix's four-eyed gaze, remembering that chance meeting in a maintenance tunnel that had changed everything. "It began with trust," she said simply. "And the willingness to see beyond our differences. The Third Sunforge clan has reconsidered many of its traditional views," Thorix added, their voice resonating through the chamber. "We believed strength came only from independence. Engineer Patel showed us that true power can arise from connection." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent alert. A Galaxian research vessel had suffered severe damage from an ion storm and was requesting emergency docking. Commander Zhou looked to Reyna and Thorix immediately. "The damage is extensive," Reyna analyzed the incoming data. "Their crystalline core is destabilizing. Traditional repairs won't work fast enough." "Then perhaps it is time to show the galaxy what unconventional repairs can achieve," Thorix suggested. They moved as one unit to the emergency dock, gathering a mixed team of human engineers and Galaxian energy specialists along the way. As the damaged vessel docked, they could see the fractures in its crystalline superstructure, far worse than anything they'd dealt with before. "The core's resonance is critical," one of the Galaxian specialists reported. "Our traditional methods cannot contain it." Reyna studied the energy patterns, remembering every lesson learned over the past months. "We don't need to contain it. We need to help it adapt." She looked at her gathered team. "Like we did." What followed was a symphony of cooperation that would have been impossible just months ago. Human engineers used modified tools to create new pathways while Galaxian specialists channeled their energy through them. Thorix coordinated between the teams, their presence a bridge between two worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Hours later, as the rescued vessel's crew marveled at their restored ship, Reyna found herself in one of the station's observation lounges. The repaired Galaxian vessel gleamed against the backdrop of stars, its crystalline structure now bearing subtle traces of human engineering that made it stronger than before. "The Galactic Assembly will have even more questions now," Thorix said, joining her at the viewport. "This repair method is unprecedented. Everything about us is unprecedented," Reyna smiled. A human engineer and a Galaxian warrior, saving ships and stations together. The old me wouldn't have believed it possible. The old me would have considered it a weakness to need help. Thorax's crystalline form shifted in what Reyna now recognized as their version of amusement. Now I understand that reaching across differences is its own kind of strength. Commander Zhou's voice came over the station's comm system, announcing the successful completion of the rescue operation. As cheers erupted from both humans and Galaxians throughout the station, Reyna reflected on how far they'd come. The synthesis team had tried to force evolution, but real change had come from something simpler, one engineer seeing past size and species to help someone in need, and one warrior being willing to accept that help. Their friendship had become a blueprint for possibility, proving that the strongest bridges are built not through force, but through understanding. The Third Sunforge clan has a saying, Thorik said quietly. The brightest crystals are formed under pressure. Perhaps the same is true of bonds between species. Reyna watched as more ships appeared in the distance, vessels from across the galaxy, drawn by news of what was happening on Space Station Omega. Well, she said, checking her tool belt out of habit, whatever pressures come next, we'll face them together. The station hummed around them with its unique harmony of human and Galaxian technologies, a living testament to what was possible when different worlds reached out to each other. In the end, the biggest changes hadn't come from grand plans or forced evolution, but from two unlikely friends who saw past their differences to build something new. As they stood together watching the stars, both knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more bridges to build, more barriers to break. But they had proven that the space between stars and species could be crossed, one connection at a time.